Hi, Misha here. And in the fifth part in my series looking at the Soviet MiGs, we're on to the fourth generation and an up-close look at the MiG-29, designated as the Fulcrum by NATO, and also often called the Fulcrum in Russia, with a guest appearance by the Sukhoi Su-27, because you really can't talk about the 29 without talking some about the 27. But the Sukhoi planes will have their own video in the future. I knew that was going to happen. These JC stands are quite difficult. Let me get this balanced and then I'll be right back. Decided just to take it off the stand. Normally I don't, but it just seems safer. For whatever reason, these stands don't really like to sit on cloth. They do okay on harder surfaces, but anyway, the MiG-29. This dates back to 1969, when the Soviet General Directorate ordered a new generation of multi-role fighter with pretty steep requirements. Originally, it needed to be maneuverable, have a large weapons loadout, long range, able to take off and land on primitive and short runways, be Mach 2, have a high ceiling, essentially a do-everything, one-size-fits-all fighter. This was not realistic, and by 1971 they realized this. So they amended the order to provide for two new aircraft. Essentially a light tactical fighter, small, agile, maneuverable, which became the MiG-29, and a heavy long-range fighter, which very much became the Sukhoi Su-27. Work began in earnest in 1974, and the first prototype took flight in 1977. Work continued after that, and production was ready by 1981. And this went into Soviet service in 1982, although it was kept under wraps for a number of years. But eventually it was shown to the public in the West in 1986, and again in the Paris Air Show in 1989. This was definitively a fourth generation fighter. This generation was kind of defined by a return to the emphasis on maneuverability and the fighter, more advanced electronics, the use of more and more micro computers, and also fly-by-wire. The MiG-29 is quite a high-performance craft, all things considered. It's actually a relatively small craft for a fourth generation. It's about 57 feet long, with about a 37-foot wingspan. That probably seems big compared to the older ones, But if you look at the Sukhoi, well, we are a lot larger, about 72 foot long, with a wingspan of about 46 feet. The MiG-29 is certainly fast enough, although not the fastest ever made. It's about Mach 2.2 to 2.3 maximum at altitude. It can reach heights of just under 60,000 feet. Comparing that with the Sukhoi, it can get up to about Mach 2.3 to 2.4 and reach an altitude of about 65,000 feet. On the other hand, the MiG here is, again, a much smaller, lighter, easier to operate fighter. It has 6 hard points under the wings for missiles, bombs, rockets, whatever you might need, plus an additional under the fuselage, often used for fuel tanks. It has 2 engines. This is quite famous for this critter. Has a cannon, 30 millimeter. Some versions had 100 round capacity, others had 150 rounds, so not bad for a lightweight. It was designed for dogfighting and support, and to be used as a light bomber. "30 nations would end up using the MiG-29, so for a modern design, it's quite successful. And this is still in production today. About 1,600 have been produced in Russia. Certainly a very advanced fighter for when it was introduced in the 1980s. Originally, the whole program was set about because Russia was worried about the F-15, which is ironic because the F-15 really got going because America was worried about the MiG-25. The MiG-29 essentially replaced the MiG-23 in Russian service, and the Sukhoi would partially replace the MiG-25. These would continue on in Russian use after the fall of the Soviet Union. In 2007, an updated version known as the MiG-35 came around. But this was definitely not the first variant. No, there were many. The MiG-29S was an update of the mid-80s. One nice thing about using computers in these, in any 4th generation fighter, they became much easier to upgrade and update and keep modern. So they wouldn't, date as much. There was also the 29M, which is a dedicated multi-role. It's kind of funny to say that, I guess. It's not exactly right, but a multi-role variant. The MiG-29K was a naval specialized variant. And the MiG-29 SMT is probably about the most modern variant. While Russia has been flying these ever since, unfortunately, funding became very tight after the fall of the Soviet Union, beginning in the late 90s and 2000s. And so many in Russia chose to update the Su-27s and kind of neglect the MiG-29 fleet. As a result, after several accidents and crashes and other mishaps, they were grounded in 2008. And pending an investigation and inspection, 100 were cleared for operations in 2009 in Russia. However, nearly 100, if not more, were deemed as essentially junk. They had been allowed to deteriorate, basically rot away to the point they weren't worth salvaging. So unfortunately, a lot of MiG-29s were neglected in Russia. This one here is a model of a 1991, so very late Soviet. It was hoped that the Air Force especially wanted to update existing MiG-29s to the SMT, but there was just not the funding. In fact, Russia was talking about retiring the 29 and replacing it with something new around 2013. But then they turned around and ordered 16 brand new MiG-29 SMTs in 2014. So, still going on. However, really, the star of the show now is the Su-27. It has a higher speed, higher top altitude. It has a total of 10 hard points. It's just a bigger, badder, and whatnot aircraft. But again, it'll get its own video. It is certainly relevant, but it seems to be taking over. In fact, Sukhoi has kind of taken over from MiG in Russia in more recent years. But for half a century, MiG made Russia's cutting-edge fighter jets. I mean, up to the 27, really, Sukhoi. They had the 24 and the 25, but the 25 was basically a flying tank. And a lot of the other designs, like the Su-7, Su-9, Su-15, and Su-22, well, successful in their own right, were almost always eclipsed by the MiG. But it seems like with the disillusionment of the USSR, the MiG-2 has kind of fallen, I wouldn't say away completely, but it has waned. Just kind of how it goes, I suppose. This is, as I said in the first video, my only non-Hobby Master model of these MiGs. This is JC wings. It's because Hobby Master doesn't do a 29. Not really sure why. They seem, too, to kind of have dedicated themselves in more recent times to the SUs. They've done a lot with the 25, 27, 33, 34, 35. Trying to think, I mean, they have the MiGs, but it seems like most of their MiGs are pre-existing. They are putting out a few more paint schemes for the 21s, but again, the 21's such an iconic fighter. I don't know, I mean, the Hobby Masters I still like more, but the JC here isn't bad. It does have a few more moving parts. The canopy does open with a little pilot. The ordnance straps on just like it would on the Hobby Master. Very similar. Still a diecast model. They feel good. The stands aren't included. You have to buy them separately. I do like that they're metal, but I wish they would peg into the planes like the Hobby Masters. Instead, they kind of use engine intakes and whatnot. Oh well. And these are based on the old molds used by Whitty Wings. And they're very similar to the current Herpa, except in price. They're about half the price of the Herpa, so there is that. So there you have it. The MiG-29 Fulcrum. Still in service today, if aging. And wrapping up the 4th generation of Russian fighters. And kind of this little mini-series. But like I said, I will do one on the SUs, as well as American, British, other aircraft. Any questions or comments, I do welcome them below. If you could, like, share, and subscribe. And tune in again next time for some more long, aimless ramblings about whatever. This is Misha, and I'll catch you next time.